Welcome, ladies, gentlemen, and all you lovely chaotic neutrals. My name is Ed, and this is Dragons and Diatribes Homebrew Support. The tiefling cackles, and between her horns curling upwards, a mote of flame appears. It is small at first, but grows to a bonfire suspended above her head. The flames leap to her red hands, her clawed feet, and as she steps towards you, you realize that the stone under her feet is turned to slag. This is close to my description of Chandra, a Pyromancer villain with a name that is quite on the nose for any fans of Magic the Gathering. The party in my gothic horror campaign had been tasked with bringing a madman to the monastery of Ethelred the Moondrowned, a holy healer in the order of Selenia, the Veiled Maiden, the goddess of the moon. The party gave their captured enemy to the brothers and sisters for healing, as fixing the minds of the broken is what they do best. The patients of the sanatorium happened to have their outdoors time when the party arrived, and they immediately were drawn to the red-skinned, hornless tiefling, an oddity in the world, who was scrunched up, knees to chin, simply lighting a small flame in her palm, and then extinguishing it again. They heard that she had once been a joyous young foundling of the monastery, but began to turn violent after she was burned severely. That night, the party learned that the patient they had brought had been carrying a darkness, some kind of remnant of the god of apostates residing within, and this remnant was released. After trying and failing to pull the party's cleric away from his devotion to the Lady of Twilight, the remnant pursued the mad tiefling and facilitated a mass escape of the patients led by Chandra herself, now in a beautiful, horrifying form. When I was preparing this encounter, I looked for an appropriate stat block to represent Chandra the Pyromancer. The party was 6th level, and I wanted the encounter to be rather difficult. Chandra was aided by a young black dragon and a madman who summoned dark tendrils from the space in between, his mind scarred by extraplanar contact. He will perhaps be the subject of another video, but in terms of the Pyromancer, no stat block really suited the fantasy I wish my players to encounter, while being easy and fun for me to run as the DM. I first considered creating a high-level, decently powerful Wildfire Druid, Circle of Wildfire Druid, but the spell list and the glut of abilities was a little overwhelming. The first thing I wanted was simplicity. I'm not adverse to using spells, as you'll see, but using a spell list for monsters the same way players use spell lists for their characters is overwhelming and often unnecessary. Any DM knows that a one-time villain will not be able to cast any more than 5 or 6 spells in the course of a combat, generally speaking, so why bother preparing 15? Secondly, I wanted to emphasize the fantasy of the flame-flinging, burning mage encased in fire, and see how I could make that work within the stat block. This stat block does not need to be a tiefling. It works just as effectively as a red or gold dragonborn, a fire genasi, a leveled down Afriti, or a leveled down fire elemental. It could also just be a human or elf who is particularly adept at fire. These and many others work with the stat block. So, first things first, the stats. I had to choose which would be primary, and as fire is a force of nature, I decided on wisdom in the spirit of druids and rangers. Our Pyromancer has a wisdom of 18 for a +4 modifier. Next, anyone who chooses fire as their element of choice has a flair for the dramatic, so her secondary stat is charisma with a +3, a 16. Her tertiary stat is constitution, as being able to survive burning requires a great deal of toughness. For this combat, I gave her a 14 +2, but I could easily see bumping that up to a 16. Next, dexterity. We want a little bit of nimbleness, but the Pyro should not be too slippery, as she is a mage, so I went with a 12 +1. Strength and intelligence are at the bottom, both 10 with no modifier. She has proficiency in wisdom and charisma saving throws with a +3 proficiency bonus. For the other stats, I gave her a maximum hit points of 60, which seems squishy, but she has access to more hit points, as you'll see in a little bit. I gave her an armor class of 15, did her dexterity, hardened skin, and the difficulty of hitting something that is glowing so bright. This ability, the brightness, will come back a little bit later. She has a standard speed of 30. Now, for the fun passive abilities. She obviously has immunity to fire damage. If she did not, Wreathed in Flames would be pretty horrible, surrounded by flames, and painful. Now, any intelligent party sees a lot of fire, and they immediately think to throw some cold damage at it. Here's where we are a little sneaky. We will also give her immunity to cold damage, as any ice is immediately evaporated as it enters her flames. Next, flames leap from her to anyone who hits her with a melee attack. Passively, she deals 1d6 fire damage each time someone hits her with a melee attack. Monks better beware. She can cast Hellish Rebuke as a second level spell as a reaction, which means even ranged characters are not safe from her fiery retribution. Now, a really fun passive that she had, remember I said she has access to more hit points, is called Rebirth from the Flames. So as the fight goes on, narrate how she is getting more and more beaten down. And then when a player lands what seems like it should be the final blow, she explodes in a miniature supernova. When she is reduced to 0, she bursts out in flames, regains half of her maximum HP, so with this stat block, up to 30. And for the rest of the fight, attacks that rely on sight are made with disadvantage due to the blinding flames emanating from her. Also, when she drops to 0, all characters within 10 feet of her have to make a dexterity saving throw. If they fail, they take 4d10 fire damage. If they succeed, they take half. This really feels like a second stage of the fight, and your players will panic, realizing that her wounds have closed partially due to the flames' cauterization. Now, in terms of the action she has available, she has a lot of passives and a lot of ways to deal some very explosive damage, especially against a low-level party. So the normal actions, I felt, should not have the same explosive damage potential, but should still pack a punch. Her ranged option, primary ranged option, is called Fire Blast. She has a +7 to hit, a range of 50 feet, and if she hits, she deals 2d10 plus 4 fire damage. This should ring to anybody's ears as a slightly more powerful version of Firebolt. Her melee option is called Burning Claws. She can make this attack twice instead of just once, like the ranged option, with a +7, and she deals 1d6 plus 4 for each claw. This one may have been a little bit underpowered in my encounter, and definitely could be amped up to a d8, d10, or even d12 if she's a solo villain. She can also cast Heat Metal as an action. This is great to cast on the cleric or paladin, and the party will realize they are on a timer as their healer's health is slowly whittled down with her bonus action each turn. I also gave her access to Burning Hands as a second level spell for a little bit of AoE and to encourage the party to think creatively and spread out. Now, I gave her 2 legendary resistances, 2 charges of legendary resistance. You could just as easily give her 1, give her 3, or give her none, depending on the situation you gave her in. I wanted her to feel a little stronger, a little more powerful. So I went with 2 instances and worked to great effect. Also can help her keep concentration on that heat metal. So that is the basic explanation of my Pyromancer build that I threw at my players. She was frightening and explosive and gave the party a real challenge. I hope I was able to give you some insight into my process of creating a villain and gave you some ideas that you can implement at your own table. So, until next time.